Ahoy! Ahoy there, welders. My name is Jim Stucker. I teach welding at Laney College and other places too. But for now, I want to go over, for those of you who are stick welders, a little bit of a document that I prepared for inside the classroom, face-to-face classroom, but since we're not able to do that, I have to bring it to you through Canvas. I will also post this up on YouTube and have those links for you in Canvas so you can get to them. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to see this PowerPoint. I got to say share. There it is. I hope you can see this and I hope you can hear me, and I hope the everything's coming through okay. I have a lot of trouble with Zoomy Tunes. Okay, you remember Looney Tunes? Well, I'll call them Zoomy Tunes. Anyway, so what is SMW? Shielded metal arc welding. It's not that sticky a problem, is it? So let's see. The first thing is, most people that the periodic table of elements has 118 elements. 91 are classified as metals. Now, that's not going to mean you can weld them all, but stick welding is one of the most common methods for joining metals together. Mostly we're talking about carbon steel, structural steel, pipe steel. So what? A little bit of history, huh? You know, welding's been around for a long time. Goes back to as far as the ancient Egypt. I'm pretty sure the ancient aliens showed folks how to make jewelry and face masks, and they used a process called forge welding. That's where you put two pieces of metal together, stick it in the fire, get them really, really, really hot, and then you bang them together with a hammer. So they didn't have to do that with gold so much, but they did that with weapons and other stuff. Okay, so ancient aliens helped the Egyptians. Wow. All right, so even after that, the blacksmithing, foundry and blacksmithing came around. And here's Apollo, which is the Greek god, at the forge of Vulcan. He was a Greek god. And you notice that they're all wearing their PPE, right? There's safety toes, there's safety glasses, their leathers, their gloves. Yeah, got some red hot fire going right there. So that's how they used to do it in the old day. Not that old, guys, come on. And then another way of joining steel was over 100 years ago. Remember the ironclad ships during the Civil War? Those were used all by riveting. And so some of the old bridges and boats, you can still see it together, riveted. You can see this riveted steel. That's how they put it together. They drilled a hole, then they banged in a hot rivet. So it added weight to the bridge. And anyway, that was a long time ago. But what we want to talk about is some more modern techniques like oxyacetylene, cutting, and welding. And of course, this guy's got a welding tip on his torch. Right, so that you guys get a chance to do some oxy welding, at least some oxy welding and some brazing and some soldering. I like to teach those in my classes. If you're interested, come see me, because you should at least be experienced and see it, at least see it. You can always go on YouTube how to do it too. But cutting is real important. Oxyacetylene cutting is real important to you. You need to get be really good at that while you're in school here. Master that, because you'll be doing a lot of that, and you need to do a good job with oxyacetylene cutting. So what we mostly do in welding schools is stick welding, Tig welding, MIG welding, and flux core welding. Basically 4 things there. So notice there that they all have SMAW, GTAW, GMAW, and FCAW. Wow, what's common there? That's right. They all have AW in their names. That's AW stands for arc welding. And what that means, they all use electricity to supply the heat needed to melt the metals together. There's always a filler wire, pretty much always a filler wire used to fill a joint with extra materials, right? So arc welding. All right, there's another thing we'll talk about. Oxyacetylene gas cutting and welding is a little bit older than stick welding, a little over 100 years, guys. It doesn't use electricity, but even though it's an old process, it's still pretty useful today. And we can assume that some of the natural gas transmission lines that run under your town were welded using the gas axe, which is the other old school way of describing oxy welding and cutting. What's interesting here, there's another common feature in all the above mentioned welding process that's hidden and invisible. And let's take a closer look at that mystery. All right, so oxyacetylene, oxyfuel, depends on what gas you're using, is a method of cutting and welding using a combination of fuel gases such as oxygen, or acetylene and MAP gas, natural gas. Welding, all right, is the gas shielded by gases provided by a flux shield. Tungsten welding, TIG welding, uses argon as a shielding gas. MIG welding uses a combination of different gases depending on the application. And flux core also provides a gas, and I call flux core stick welding inside out. And so I'll explain that a little bit more further. Hundreds of different types of welding processes: laser, electron beam, plasma, explosion welding, friction welding. And what I'm looking for is a phaser. You remember Star Trek? Put your phaser on stun. You know, beam me up, Scotty. I want a phaser gun. A little handheld thing that would cut or weld, or you could put it on stun and take care of the ancient aliens, right? In the meantime, we notice that all these processes have to do with, right, the electric current supplies heat to create the electric arc, which melts the metal, but the gas provides a protective gaseous shield that surrounds the molten metal, and let's call that molten metal a puddle. That's what it is, and that's what you'll hear me keep talking about. Watch that puddle. Try to make that puddle consistent. So there's a little animation of, and I do have a better animation. It just came out to me in the email the other day, and I'll post that on YouTube, so you'll enjoy that. So it talks about all the different types of welding in an animated form. So, just know that the arc is supplied by the electricity, and the gas is supplied by different ways. It could be flux, could be a gas out of a bottle, or it could be a vacuum. Like if you were in outer space, well, you wouldn't need a gas. You just need to have the arc. So it's the gases that shield the puddle from the harmful effects of the air. If the gas weren't present, then the puddle would oxidize and turn to rust immediately. As you can see in this left-hand picture, that's oxidized weld bead. Oh my goodness, isn't that gorgeous? It's kind of a sort of an exaggeration of the actual chemistry and burn. Nonetheless, the welding process would not be successful without gas shielding. So you're going to learn about that, and you'll see what happens when you don't get the gas. So this is Tig Weld that was produced on a, looks like, maybe it's not stainless, it's just cleaned up metal. All right, nevertheless. So how did stick welding come about? And then you'll have a basic understanding of all the other processes. And so around the turn of the century, last century, 100 years ago, folks knew about the electric arc, and a Swedish person took a coat hanger, he attached a battery and slid it across a piece of metal, and notice how the arc marks created a small molten spots on the base metal, right? I wonder what would happen if I wrap some newspaper around the coat hanger. And then there's a eureka moment, right? Aha! He found that the newspaper would burn the heat created by the electric arc, and as it burned, it created a gas consisting mainly of CO2. And the CO2, which is an inert gas, in other words, it doesn't burn, it helps stabilize the arc. It protected the molten puddle from the atmosphere, and it provided a slag coating over the top of the deposited metal to keep it from cooling too fast, which can cause the weld bead to become brittle, which is not a good thing if you want the bridge, the ship you're building won't break. So structurally speaking, you want something more bendy and flexible that won't break whenever a load is applied. And so bazinga, that was the birth of the popular welding electrodes that are still in use today. Still using. Question so far, right? So what I like to do is let students know what not to do when welding. So one of my first lectures is about discontinuities. These are things like cracks, porosity, undercut, overlap, slag inclusion. There's a whole bunch of them. And these leads to discussion pertaining to properties of metal, such as tensile strength, ductility, hardness. These are all metallurgical terminologies. And these lead into deeper lessons, diving into pertaining to metallurgy and the designment of weldments, such as the various types of weld joints that welders may commonly encounter. However, with that said, our very first concern is always about welding safety, and we'll spend quite a bit of time over welding safety before we even get into the welding lab. And that's where we'll begin our welding experiments. And of course, the lab is a place where you experiment, right? All experimentation is done in a lab. Well, it's no different in a welding lab. So I encourage you all to experiment with the welding process as we go through them. In other words, you're going to heat up, you're going to put it down, you're going to use a big rod, you're going to use a little rod, you're going to be doing this, that. And so experiment. And what you're going to be doing is trying to dial it in to where you can weld consistently every time a nice bead and tie it all in together and make a nice weld, okay? It's good. Generally, it is good. And if it is good, then it'll pass a non-destructive or a destructive test. And then once it passes a test, then you'll become, quote, certified or qualified to weld on a job site. So that's about all I have for you today. And I'm going to stop the share. And so that was the history of welding, especially about the stick welding. And so there's a whole bunch of different kinds of stick welds. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of flux core weld, a whole bunch of different kinds of MIG weld, all kind of things. And you're going to learn all kind of stuff when you take welding in my class. So, all right, that's it. Good luck. And I'll see you in the lab. I'm going to stop the recording now. Stop recording.